Edward Snape, CEO of Fiery Angel and theatrical producer, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell us, for those at home who perhaps haven't heard of your company but certainly know your shows, what Fiery Angel have been doing in recent years?
A big range of work. We were when lockdown happened, we were literally going in to do Hairspray. So we were co-producing that with Adam Spiegel, and that was with the lovely Michael Ball and Paul Merton. But we do Circus 1903 at the Royal Festival Hall. We had Clive Owen, Leah Williams doing The Night of the Iguana. We managed Fleabag with a certain Phoebe Waller-Bridge. So we're very broad range in our work.
And you've been working the theatre for a very long time, haven't you? I think going all the way back to your teenage years. Is that right?
Yes, I think I was 19. I managed to get, I don't know how I talked someone into it, but I managed to get myself the job as theatre manager at the Pavilion Theatre in Cromer.
And have you been active in theatre ever since? Have you had any breaks?
Yeah, just no breaks. I mean, and I think as a kid, I was no good at school, not very good at sport, and I think my father was in, well, he was in the theatre business, and I just knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Right. So how has this crisis that we're all living through impacted your work with Fiery Angel?
It's just like everybody, it's just awful. I mean, completely unprecedented. We could go back hundreds of years for any comparison, probably to Shakespeare's time. I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah.
Everything's come to a full stop, and we're just trying to pick our way through the pieces and trying also to work out when do we actually restart, because we've been saying as much as we can to government that socially distanced performances in terms of economics doesn't really work.
Yes, I noticed today, and it's interesting that I'm talking to you today when DCMS and Arts Council England have now announced their criteria for bidding for some of the 1.57 billion. A phrase that crops up a lot in that is value for money, and that shows should be, or theatre should be operating on a value for money basis. Do you think they're saying there that social distancing isn't value for money and you shouldn't do it?
Yes, I think they are. I think that they're trying to, and I do understand, ensure that organizations are genuinely sustainable, because we are going to probably get local lockdowns happening, and there needs to be a sort of robust framework where theatres are not literally teetering on the edge.
Yes. Lots of people have been critical of the government, saying that their response, and in fact the Culture Select Committee have said this, that the government's response has been very slow when it comes to the cultural sector. Why do you think that is?
Because I think it's unprecedented. I'm sure we can lay some blame, but I think we're beyond that now, and I think we've just got to be aware and grateful that there is money coming its way. But I think, if you're a freelancer, it must feel like, well, what's this got to do with me? It must feel completely irrelevant.
Yes. You're active in the commercial side of theatre. Am I right to say that?
Yeah.
So a body like Arts Council England, do you have anything to do with them under normal circumstances, and will you have anything to do with them now?
Yes, we have a sister company called the Children's Theatre Partnership, and that gets support from the Arts Council. So, I'm supportive of the Arts Council, but I think we've all got to remember that the commercial sector is actually 70 to 80% in value of all theatre. It's a huge part, much more than I think people realise.
Do you think that you and colleagues and unions, etc., Society of London Theatres, which I think you're involved with, presumably you've all been making the economic argument for the cultural sector very powerfully to government, saying, look what we bring to the Treasury every year?
Yeah, we have, and I think it's been heard.
Yeah. Do you think that the government are feeling that there's a difference when it comes to the economy between bars and restaurants, let's say, and theatres and other forms of cultural entertainment?
Well, we're all joined together. The bars, the restaurants, people go to and have a meal before they go to the theatre. They get a cab, they get a train. We're all part of the same economy, really.
Yes. Do you think that the government haven't understood how bad things could get for town centres, London and other places.
Theatres are so often the hub. You know, they are. If you go to Leicester, you know, God bless them. You know, they're in lockdown, but the theatre is so often when you walk there, you go, this is the hub. It's like churches were, you know, 100 years ago. Sort of churches were the sort of maybe the hub, and now it's. I would argue theatres are a sort of cultural and spiritual hub of so many cities, towns in the UK.
Yes, I've long been worrying that, and it came from a Richard Morrison article in the Times just before the 1.57 billion was announced. Richard Morrison used this phrase, aggressive mothballing. I'm not sure where he got it, whether he made it up or he got it from somebody else. Having read the guidelines announced today, I worry that mothballing is the government's policy when it comes to things.
I think you're right. And I think we're being quietly told that we're not going to reopen until at least March, April. And that is, for me, you know, hoping to get work on before then, keeping our staff in employment, keeping us, you know, the wheels going around. That's, you know, we're barely in August. And so on one hand, I think, you know, the government is trying to give us some certainty when they're struggling, but I think there is something coming through where she's bordering on consistent, which is March, April. That's my sense. And that I think Oliver Dowden this morning was on the Today programme, and I think he said, look, we are not going to announce anything until at least November. So yes. That, given how the lead times work, I think that takes you to sort of March, April.
Do you think the public have quite cottoned on yet to what that will mean in terms of Christmas, let's say, and what they might do with their families, go to a panto or something?
I mean, here's some good news. I mean, we moved Hairspray 3 times now. So we were first of all going to open in April, just gone, or recent this year. And we put it back on public sale this week, and we took a lot of money, and that was not what we were expecting at all. So I think I can't speak for Christmas because I think it's unlikely that Christmas is going to happen in reality. But I was encouraged that people right now are willing to get their credit cards out and make a booking for a show next April. That was encouraging.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think that the survival of London, let's look at London for a second, because it's so big, the West End, is dependent upon tourist traffic? What will happen if the tourists don't come back?
So London, I think, is, broadly speaking, and this is a huge generalization, but I would say it's about a third Londoners, a third UK, people coming from outside the M25, and a third overseas. Well, there is nobody coming from overseas. And when I walk through the West End at the moment, it is the most soul-destroying thing to do. I mean, it's empty. And you forget that the office staff are not there. You know, people are not in offices. So it's not just that the theatres and the restaurants, or the restaurants are now actually slowly reopening, but it's still a ghost town in reality. And therefore, probably, as much as I hate to acknowledge it, that does mean that, you know, we are looking to March, April next year.
I wonder whether there's a longer term shift as well in terms of offices and city centre working, that a lot of people are going to carry on working virtually as they have been during lockdown. And maybe the centre of London will never quite bustle like it did before March.
Cameron spoke about this in the Evening Standard, and he said, and I think, as we touched on earlier, you know, theatres are such a big part of being the hub of a community, whether it's in a town or indeed the West End. You know, as with Broadway, the West End theatre is a destination, and of course, we're not just talking the commercial sector; we're talking the Royal Court, the National, the Almeida. You know, we're all we're all part of it. So yes, I think the office is going to do, people are not probably going to return to the offices as they used to. RBS has announced people are not coming back to their offices until next year. And I think Google have done the same, something similar.
Thinking about your business and the way you produce shows, when you want to get a show on the road, as it were, presumably you have to engage a really large number of people with lots of different skills.
Yeah.
Looking forward to next March and April, if that is when things get back going, and you want to get a show on the road, do you think you will be able to engage those people? Will they still be working in the industry? Will they have survived that long?
Well, I mean, we've all got to survive somehow. I mean, I don't know how we do, and I think for some people, you know, I think it's the Theatre Artists Fund that Netflix is supporting, you know, for so many freelancers is essential. All I can do is say, I hope so, yes, because we need so many people, you know, technicians, not just the performers, the makeup, the people who, you know, we had a set half being built in terms of construction. I did not know until the lockdown, and certainly not done the maths, that, you know, the freelancers run into the hundreds. It's probably 200 plus thousand people. We are a big industry, and all I can do is hope that people are there when we start again. Yes. March, April.
Do you think that the government would like to help freelancers? They just can't work out a way how to do it.
Well, if they are, they're being bloody minded about it. I mean, I'll give you an example. We were in week one of Hairspray rehearsals, and I and Adam had to, you know, announce that lockdown meant that we just could not continue. At that point, we were hopeful. We had many freelancers, and we still will put them, or indeed PAYE, either through with HMRC, and they were bloody minded because about 9 people just fell between the stools and the net in terms of the timing. And although we had proof that these people were engaged by us, these people could not get the necessary support from HMRC just by a sort of computer says no mentality. And we tried and tried and tried. So people are falling between the net, and we've got direct experience of that. And I think that's where the government and HMRC, you know, should hang their heads in shame, because, you know, if it was the other way around and the HMRC could prove that we had done all the right things, it just was a technicality, they would be on to us immediately to pay up. Well, the HMRC should be paying these people who are, you know, were absolutely correctly employed and should have been looked after.
Yeah. Who do you think is out there fighting the freelancers' corner right now?
Well, I hope we all are. I mean, I think it's been late, and I think the announcement of, and I know there are many other initiatives, but the Theatre Artists Fund that Netflix has contributed to, it is late, but I think we are all, you know, certainly we've donated, and I call on anyone who's got pennies to spare to donate, because people are clearly suffering. Some, I think and assume, will be getting relief in terms of their past tax records. But again, as I say, if you fall between stools and the computer says no, you're in real hardship. Yes. So I think we've been late, but we are now waking up to it. And I believe more big pledges are coming its way towards these funds that will distribute to thousands of people who need money.
Yeah, it was a massive blow announced the other day, a sort of totemic show, Phantom of the Opera, closing permanently. Do you think that was absolutely necessary?
I was certainly surprised by that. Yes, I was really surprised by that. I, I don't know the answer to that. Did not see that coming. Not at all. Shocking, really shocking.
Yeah.
Is it a cry wolf? You know, is it one of? I don't know. Possibly, but Phantom's a great show. Actually, I've only ever seen it maybe a couple of times, but every time, both times I've been, it's a wonderful show, and it's a huge tourist attraction. It must be.
It must be. I think it's the third longest running show on Broadway. It's got to be up there in the West End. I mean, do you think this crisis will end up, as if we look back in 20, 30 years, will we look back and think, wow, it really provoked a revolution in the theatre world in the UK, do you think?
Not sure about a revolution.
Perhaps evolution would be a better word.
Things will definitely change. I think we've learned, from a producer's perspective, I think I've learned just how important freelancers and the network of people that we are all part of. Things will definitely change. I think the relationship between landlords and producers are going to change. I think we've just got to come closer together. And that sounds a bit corny, but I actually mean that. I think we just got to be aware that we're all part of a community. I mean, last year we had 5, if not more, but 5 shows on in the West End. And it was just one after the other. And we just know that there is this extraordinary pool available to us that are suddenly able to put in, you know, sound and lighting and you know, wardrobe departments that we sort of, if I'm absolutely honest, probably take for granted. And now we're kind of going, oh my goodness, you know, there are so many of them, but they're so needed. And I would like to think that changes, but I don't think there's going to be a revolution. I just hope, what I really hope is that theatre, the audiences will want to come back. I hope that we haven't got them into the habit of binging on Netflix and kind of going, do you know what, theatre was something we used to do? And that's my biggest fear, is that, you know, people get out of the habit of going to offices, they get out of the habit of going to the theatre. That is going to be something that government can't deal with. We can't deal with. We would just lose an industry in its entirety.
Yes. And the last time that the theatre land was shut like this, I think, was the Great Plague in 1665. And had this crisis happened at any point in history prior to now, there would have been no Netflix and no internet and no other way for people to engage with cultural content. But there is now. And I wonder whether the fact that these two things have happened at the same time may make what you've just described more likely.
Yeah, that's what I'm fearful of. But also, again, you know, Netflix benefits from the huge pool of talent that's so often crafted and learned in the theatre industry. You know, so Netflix and Amazon and BBC, ITV, they all benefit from Phoebe Waller-Bridge doing a one-woman show at Soho Theatre a few years ago. And then somebody goes, let's make that into a television series. And then it comes full circle, and Phoebe comes and presents her show Fleabag in the West End last summer. Now, in the middle of all of that has been a huge Netflix and BBC series, which has made them a lot of money, but it started in the theatre.
Yes. As a producer, are you looking at ways to take your content online and offer it digitally?
Not personally yet, or not. The problem is, how do you monetize it? People are in a habit of paying 10, 15 pounds a month. These are not big sums of money. And theatre is expecting 30, 40, 50, 60, sometimes more pounds per person. You know, 3 people watching Netflix is not going to bring in anything like that kind of money. So I think it's going to prove really hard to monetize, But it is going to happen, and maybe I'm just a little bit behind the curveball. But I'm just a theatre person at heart, and I kind of want to think that people will just go in and pay happily to see live theatre.
Yeah. Well, look, let's wind up by trying to look on the bright side and trying to be optimistic. Let's say we're having this. Let's say we're having this conversation in a year's time, July 2021, and everything's kind of back to normal. And we look back and think, how did we get back to normal? What do you think that might look like?
So, what are we talking? 12 months ahead from now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Panto will be back properly for the first time, and I think pantomime is a huge part of the whole theatre sector. So it's a first experience visit for so many people. So I'd like to think by then people are booking their pantomime, their Christmas show. I would like to think that 80% of the shows in the West End are on, and most of the touring is happening, and the producing houses are all open. But we will still be in some state of shock, I think, still, even then. And I just, as I say, my only fear is that the habit of going to the theatre, we need to hope is going to be embraced, and people just come back and welcome us, theatre practitioners, producers, whoever we are, and they give us rounds of applause.
Well, I'll drink to that. Thank you so much, Edward Snape, CEO of Fiery Angel, theatrical producer. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.